Ladies and gentlemen, can you please welcome Dr. Sharon Su, give us a key speak.
Welcome. Can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay. First of all, I really want to thank you for inviting me to speak about the realities and experiences of Buddhist women, particularly from a North American perspective. What I first want to do before giving my talk today is to thank the translators. I believe the translators have worked much harder on translating this talk than I have on actually writing the talk, so my sincere gratitude to the translators for the work they've done. It is such an honor to be invited here to speak at this truly multicultural and global gathering of Buddhists for the 9th International Conference on Buddhist Women. I would really like to extend my gratitude to the conference coordinators, to Venerable Karma Lek Tsomo, to our Malaysian hosts, and all the volunteers, as well as all the conference participants for this opportunity to meet and speak with you today. So thank you again. Welcome. Now, we are all living indeed in a historic moment of time-space compression, where what was once foreign and far away is now readily available at the click of a computer mouse, the speed dial of a cell phone, and instant text messaging. The fact that we are here today in attendance as monastics and laity, scholars and practitioners from so many different countries really does reflect our commitment to transform our social reality for justice and equality and peace. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be invited to Malaysia to engage in dialogue and learn from one another about the critical issues affecting us globally, such as gender discrimination, racism, political oppression, lack of access to education, and economic disparity. What I find to be so rewarding about participating in a Sakyadhita conference is that it is from this engagement that we move from theorizing problems to actualizing change. Certainly, we only need to look back to the 1987 Sakyadhita conference that took place when conference participants returned to Sri Lanka to advocate for and reestablish the full bhikkhuni ordination lineage. What an honor it is to be with women who are so courageous and selfless in their determination to transform the Buddhist tradition so that it accounts for the rights and experiences of women as full participants in the Sangha. Yet the work is far from over, as Venerable Karma Lek Tsomo noted in her conference interview for this week. She noted that the biggest challenge is to change attitudes about women, and to do so by transforming patriarchal assumptions about women's abilities, and also enabling women to see themselves as full subjects and agents of their own lives, rather than objects who are not worthy. Now, as we become more wireless and immediate in our methods of communication and are able to travel incredible distances through time and space, it seems crucial to ask the questions about what happens to us when there are fewer and fewer actual wires, cords, and ties connecting us to a place and rooting us to a place. So what happens to us when we travel across borders, either as immigrants, refugees, and have no sense of roots, resources, and identity in a new land? Certainly, we all know that globalization, multiculturalism, transnationalism, and hybridity are terms that have acquired a certain cachet and a certain sophisticated chic. Globalization and wireless connections have enabled us to encounter a tremendous amount of diversity in cultures, traditions, economies, and religions. Indeed, one aspect of globalization and multiculturalism is the sense of what the Buddha has called interconnectedness, and what Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh has called interbeing. Yet at the same time, I would suggest we must interrogate and critique our easy use of the term globalization and multiculturalism, for these terms are often deeply tied to the economic, political, and social buying, selling, and control of people, cultures, objects, and religions. Therefore, we need to ask ourselves, has globalization and multiculturalism really enabled us to interrelate and communicate in meaningful ways that bring about social, political, religious, and economic justice? What I would like to offer today is some critical inquiry into the challenges of thinking about globalization and multiculturalism, as well as map out the terrain of key issues and questions that must be asked when addressing women in a multicultural world. I would also like to share some reflections on what I see developing in North American forms of Buddhism that will offer some interesting questions to consider from an international perspective. While I do speak from the particular context of the United States, my questions and concerns about cross-cultural dialogue, race, and gender will have some resonance internationally. So let me first begin with a simple working definition, for certainly globalization is not a monolithic term. In general, globalization, I would say, has been understood in two particular ways. The first and most general is a sense of worldwide interconnectedness, the increasing movement of people, ideas, and knowledge, goods and services, culture, crime, and technology, and more across international borders. The second aspect of globalization is the particular form of economic globalization prevailing in our world today. According to an ethicist, Cynthia Molabita, economic globalization can be defined by the following set of characteristics: the rapid increase in the movement of goods and services, as well as capital, trade and investment across international borders, privatization, and the accelerating commodification of life experiences and life forms, and a strategic marketing of Western consumerist ways of life around the world. Now, certainly, Buddhism has historically been providing important solutions to the problem of consumption over the past 2,500 years. Yet, I would argue that we still need to examine what happens to a religion when it can be commodified, objectified, and transformed into a product for sale on the internet, again at the click of the mouse. What are the implications for the practitioners of a religion when its rituals, doctrines, and practices are priced for the wealthy and offered with such catchy titles on the internet, such as Buddhism in a box? This certainly has been happening in places like the United States and Europe, yet I am often struck by the immense disparity between the acquisition of Buddhism by the wealthy on the one hand and the challenges to practice as full participants by so many Buddhist women around the world who have been struggling historically for equal access to the Sangha. Now, as a researcher of Asian American Buddhism in the United States, I ask this question simply because when thinking about constructions of global forms of Buddhism, I am often struck by the relative ease with which dominant cultures can borrow, transform, and create a form of Buddhism that often marginalizes those who brought the Dharma to the country in the first place. Similarly, it seems that oftentimes the devotional practices of Buddhism are downplayed, and the meditative practices come to be the defining characteristics of the Buddhist tradition as it travels to different cultural milieus. Now, many books on Buddhist women in the West reflect a real fascination with meditation at the expense of lay devotion. Non-meditative practices are often characterized as popular religion and therefore somewhat less authentic forms of Buddhism. Now, the problem with this hierarchy of practices is that for many women, devotional practices are their main form of practice. Therefore, lay women's practices are often devalued and seen as less worthy endeavors. I would argue that we need to take seriously the centrality of lay devotion in Buddhist women's lives. If we fail to do so, then we distort the nature of Buddhism. Now, when seen through the lens of meditation alone, Buddhist practices of social engagement and social justice are often overlooked, and the tradition becomes reductionistic and perceived as isolationist. Yet there are such tremendous networks of international global support through Buddhist institutions that have moved across time and place and religion to provide relief through what has been called meditation in action. Because there are trends toward the commodification and objectification of Buddhism, we continually have to work to transform the international image of Buddhism to include the compassionate forms of social engagement in education programs, healthcare, disaster relief, movement for political and religious freedoms, economic justice, and interreligious dialogue. Now, in the West, it's certainly no secret that many Americans have converted to Buddhism and are quite wealthy upper middle class practitioners who wish to challenge the ill effects of consumerism and, as has often been expressed, the authoritative Judeo-Christian traditions. Yet, as somebody who studies Buddhism in North America, I'm forced to ask the question of what happens when this new form of Buddhism develops as American Buddhism, but does not interact, respond, or reflect the concerns of non-racially dominant Buddhists. In other words, what happens when, in constructing a new form of practice, the voices of minorities are not heard? In what ways are we blind to the particular struggles that immigrants may encounter while living in a new land? I have a few more questions. What damage do we do to the practice of Buddhism when these voices are continually marginalized in the narrative of a country's Sangha? In what ways do we perhaps unintentionally create a Buddhism that is of one color? While these questions are particular to my own experiences in the United States, they still articulate some of the central themes of the Sakyadhita Conference that we need to investigate with a critical eye. That is, race, classism, and gender. Now, many of you know that the introduction of Buddhism to the United States has its origins in the arrival of Asian immigrants who came to the United States to fill a need for cheap labor, and continued with the arrival of famous Zen masters such as Suzuki Roshi and the rise of beat poets who embraced the free spirit of Zen associated with the rise of the countercultural movement in the United States. Now, in the long lineage of Orientalist fantasies of faraway places, the media image of a Buddhist monk comes to symbolize that which is at first inaccessible yet desired, the abstract, sacred, faraway world. This abstract other is then brought into the immediate present for the sake of the consumer who wishes to have that which is far away right now. Now, this desire and longing for the other has been described by philosopher Martha Nussbaum as descriptive romanticism, which not only idealizes but freezes the desired other in a timeless captivity of our own imagination, and at the same time denigrates what one finds in one's own culture. Now, I'm not here to imply that all American Buddhists are non-committed consumers, certainly not the case, but rather that in the United States, there are many who perceive Buddhism not so much as a religion, but rather as a commodity that is available for purchase through mala beads, t-shirts, CDs, and statues. Now, multiculturalism has had its heyday as a feel-good concept, but depending on time and place, sometimes it can stand for a widening of vision without the concomitant transformation of perspective and attitude in the face of difference. In other words, multiculturalism can sometimes be a catchword that denotes acceptance of others, so long as that which is defining the multi and multiculturalism is somewhat assimilated and therefore, in effect, controlled. Now, while Buddhism in the United States is still in its early stage of development, having really grown and transformed with the 1965 Immigration Act, it does provide a unique example of the complexities of global multicultural nature of Buddhism. This is precisely because Buddhism in America is not monolithic. Rather, it consists of both Asian immigrants of the first, second, third, and fourth generations, white Euro-American converts, African Americans, and increasing numbers of Latino practitioners. In addition, all over the US, one can find numerous temples representing Theravada, Zen, Pure Land, Jodo Shinshu, Korean, Chinese, Tibetan, Shingon, Nichiren as neighbors in one city. Now, at first glance, it seems that indeed Buddhism is, in America, a global and multicultural phenomenon. Yet I have found that there is often very little interaction between these different communities. Certainly, various sanghas in the United States are engaged in the process of creating a new form of Buddhism, a new jhana, American Buddhism. Yet despite the multicultural nature of Buddhism in the United States, the voices that have yet to be heard from and invited into a dialogue and construction of this new form of Buddhism is that of non-white women who are deeply involved in lay devotional practices. So we can see that even in the context of a multicultural and global world, you cannot overlook the issue of race. Now, clearly, we need to bring to the table those voices of the women who are largely left out of the picture. We need to include women who are perhaps the largest supporters of international sanghas in the conversation and the process of creating new forms of Buddhism. When we do so, we begin to see how the Buddhist tradition offers immense resources that can help practitioners come to terms with the struggles of everyday living. Interestingly, I have found that one of the common responses that are made in the United States for not having more Asian American Buddhists included in conferences and panels on American Buddhism is simply a lack of English-speaking skills and some kind of insurmountable cultural divide. I've often heard this reflected when I've asked questions such as, well, why aren't there more Asian and Asian American Buddhists at the conference? Well, they don't speak English. Okay. I would simply state that if we are able to cross borders and are technologically advanced as we are, then certainly we can spend the time and resources in bringing in interpreters. Certainly we're doing that today, and it doesn't seem to be that complicated. When we lose the critical voices of Asian American women in the United States, we misrepresent and we misconstrue the Buddhist tradition and recreate forms of racial discrimination where Asian American voices and other minority voices and practices are not considered valid enough to construct the new American Buddhism. Now, moving from the US-specific context to the international context, we need to further question what we mean by international, global, and multicultural Buddhist traditions. I ask the question, whose voices make up these communities, but more importantly, whose voices are left out? When thinking about Buddhism from a global context, I often think about women struggling for full ordination status and recognition, women in Buddhist countries struggling for access to education, Buddhist women fighting for political freedom and national independence who are jailed for vocalizing their voices, and women who are struggling simply to feed their children. The list of women struggling in an international context goes on, and yet without organizations like Sakyadhita, many of these struggles would be independent without the global support necessary to forge real change. Now, interestingly, in my own work, I have often found that many contemporary feminist scholars of Buddhism maintain that women are responsible for transforming and revitalizing the Buddha Sangha to make it more gender equitable. Although the active presence of women in Buddhism has been well documented, there is often an assumption that the transformative work is done primarily by European and Euro-American Buddhist women. Now, this assumption often results in a separation between Asian forms of Buddhism that are seen as more traditional Buddhisms and what is commonly understood to be a more gender-liberated Sangha. Traditional Asian Buddhisms have often come to denote that which is other, foreign, and unassimilable. And consequently, I often find that the contributions of Asian women to the development of gender-equitable Buddhism are often overlooked. Now, I would like to raise the following questions for us to consider. The first question is, what forms of Buddhism are considered authentic? My second question, what are the various ways that women in Buddhism have resisted both patriarchal and racial forms of oppression internationally, and how can we best learn from them? And finally, how does our understanding of Buddhism change when we learn to listen to women who are deeply engaged in the Dharma, yet whose voices have yet to be heard? Now, I would like to conclude with the assertion that in theorizing globalization and multiculturalism, we must be willing to acknowledge that with the transmission of the Buddhist Dharma across time and place, the power and the ability to define new forms of Buddhism cannot rest in the hands of those with the most resources. Rather, we must acknowledge and include the diversity of voices and forms of practice that make up the multiple sanghas internationally so that we can avoid a reductionist and commodified form of Buddhism. I understand that I am out of time, so I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Dr. Eso.
Did we have time for questions, Venerables? Okay.
那现在，好，现在我们呢就介绍我们的今天的研讨会正式开始。那现在是他想，大家有没有什么问题要问发问 A 数的 ？Ladies and gentlemen, any question to be you asked? Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, there's. I think you would like to come on here. Yeah, you pass the mic for her.
First of all, thanks for a great keynote address. I enjoyed it very much. In general, I agree with your point about how the Euro-American Buddhism has been portrayed as American Buddhism, so to speak, and how lay devotional practices of Asian Americans has been marginalized. But I'm also thinking that from my own personal experiences, or even in Malaysia, I find that sometimes it's very dualistic to kind of say Asian Buddhism is mainly devotional, because there are also Asian who actually prefer meditation than devotional, and there are some who practices both. And I'm wondering what's your comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you. What is your name?
Sorry, I'm Swat Yen from, I'm a Malaysian, but I'm pursuing my PhD at Claremont Graduate University in the US. Thank you.
Thank you. I think your comment is an excellent comment. Sometimes in theorizing, we often tend to dualize what we mean to not dualize, so thank you. I think when I speak about lay practices in the United States, I often find that the fact that many lay women are doing devotional practices, some of them will meditate, but there tends to be a sense that, well, first of all, I speak about an immigrant context, that if you are an immigrant to a new country and you just come, many times the women I've spoken with have been from Korea, so recent immigrants from Korea who are lay practitioners. And they're working 24 hours, 7 days a week. And there's a sense that for many of them, they don't have the time to meditate, or that perhaps meditation doesn't necessarily provide them with all the tools that they need to come to terms with racial discrimination, working all the time, the Americanization of their children. But what I often find is that there is very little discussion about lay practice. There's so much discussion about meditation, and yet we never talk about the importance of devotion, the importance of chanting and bowing. And so even though some women I've met in the United States that are lay practitioners, they do meditate, I still think we need to focus more on elevating lay devotion to the level of meditation in order for their practices to be considered important and serious. When I go to conferences in the United States on American Buddhism, I often find a separation between what is labeled American Buddhism, which tends to be actually meditation, and then Buddhism in the United States. If you talk about Buddhism in the United States, then you have a lot of different ethnic, racial groups doing all forms of practice, but those are never brought into conversation with what's considered American Buddhism. American Buddhism does tend to be more characterized by meditation. So thank you for your question. Thank you. Any other questions? Or am I off the hot seat? Okay, thank you.
非常谢谢我们的 Dr. Asu 博士。接下来呢，我想我们的研讨会呢就进入主题。那么在这里呢，要为您介绍我们的今天的主持人黄天颂。那黄天颂呢，是我们马来西亚的马佛兴的一个要员。那么他也是能源水供通讯部的政府部门。那么接下来呢，我想待会呢，他会跟其他的主要的演讲者呢，都会带出一连串的演讲的细题。那么 ，Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you our chairman, Wong Chin Song, graduated from the National University of Malaysia. And he is the Department of Ministry of Energy, Water and Communication, also former president of the Buddhist German Fellowship in 1992 to 1999. Also a Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big hand to our chairman for the conference today, Wong Chin Song. And all the speakers, please welcome to the stage. Venerable 舍利德法师 Venerable Sister Sumitra 严爱心中医博士吴碧斌医生以及黄慧英居士。Ladies and gentlemen, give a big hand to all the speakers and our hosts.
Thank you very much, the Master of Ceremony, for the function. Actually, there is a reason why the organizing committee picked me to be the chairman for this. I think they try to reflect the population of Buddhists in Malaysia. and one of the speakers actually tell me that probably, when the number of Buddhist population in Malaysia have grown to such number, especially the ladies, probably one of these days, my seat will not be on the top here, will be probably downstairs. I'll be marginalized. And indeed, I'm very happy actually to be here among all the best women Buddhists in Malaysia. And probably on behalf of Malaysia, I'd like to take this opportunity to say Selamat Datang. It means welcome for all those delegates coming all over the world to attend the 9th Sakyadhita, the Buddhist Women Conference. Okay, and this afternoon, because this will be the first sessions, we try on the Malaysian part to show to you the best that we have. So today I'm very fortunate to have with me a pool of speakers, and they are actually professional, excellent in their respective areas, and I'm honored actually to be here to be with them and to disseminate information, knowledge about what the Malaysian Buddhist women have done for a long time to make what Malaysian Buddhism is all about now. So initially we have 6 speakers. One of them, Venerable Ji Ren, she will not be able to make to be here today, and her topic actually will be on the Buddhist education in Malaysia. Okay, I believe she has every valid reason to not to be with us in physical body, but I think in spirit, in mind, actually she's with us. And we're actually going to cover the various aspects of Buddhist development, especially the role of Buddhist women in Malaysia. So I will just take this opportunity to introduce briefly. On my extreme, on my right, you have Sister Sumitra. Okay, and then on my second right will be the Venerable Sek Liter Pháp Sư. Then we have Dr. Go Pik Pin. Then on my left, we have Dr. Hia Ai Sim. Then we have Sister Imi Wee. Okay. And the topics actually that we are going to cover will be interesting. And what I will do actually is to introduce a speaker. And the speaker actually will be given 15 minutes to do your presentation. And I will not actually to be there because as a gentleman, we normally don't pull you off your rostrum. We actually have indicators from behind. They'll tell you, it's 5 minutes time, 3 minutes time, and it's time's up. And if you do not, then I think probably the organizer will shut the mic and you know what to do. Okay? And what we are going to do is we are going to have every speaker do a presentation. And it will be actually time saving if we can, keep until the end of the panel discussion before we open for some question and answers. But if you have some question that you think that you may actually forget, well, put it down on paper. Or if not, actually, you can raise your hand. We try actually to have what we call the impromptu question and answer sessions. If not, I think we will keep until the end of the the panel speakers presentation. So the first speaker that we have Venerable Sek Liter, okay, and she's actually born in Penang and received her education in Fundamental Buddhist Studies from Malaysia Buddhist College. And Venerable then continued her studies in Hong Kong and Sri Lanka, subsequently graduating with a degree and master's in Buddhist philosophy from the Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies, University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka. And currently, Venerable holds several positions in what we call in Malaysia, the abbess of the Xiangling Jue Yuan, the chairman of the board of directors of both the Xiangling Kindergarten as well as the primary schools, and religious spiritual director of the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia, YBM, Malacca branch, as well as several Buddhist temples and associations. And Venerable is also the deputy head of the education section of Malaysian Buddhist Association. So without much ado, can we invite Venerable to give her presentation on the topic Buddhist nuns in Malaysia. Okay, Venerable.
谢谢主持人，各位法师、各位居士，下午好。今天呢，我要讲的是马来西亚比丘尼的概况。马来西亚佛教比丘尼是随着早期中国移民的浪潮而到来，在马来西亚落地生根之后呢，逐渐的成长，成为马来西亚佛教团体一股不容忽视的力量。马来西亚的比丘尼是继承大乘佛教的传统，实行大乘菩萨法门，深入民间社会，服务群众，是属于大乘佛教的比丘尼。目前在马来西亚，比丘尼的数目呢比男众比丘多，他们对社会大众的服务和贡献是受到社会的肯定和支持。早期的佛教比丘尼的活动概况在马来西亚，一般上来说，早期的佛教比丘尼大部分是专注在管理寺庙和个人修持方面。有的比丘尼则协助比丘们处理庙堂的杂事，或者是帮助他们发展佛教事业。虽然比丘尼在表面上并没有特别显出他们的贡献，但是他们实际上对佛教的发展具有全幅性的推动力。在许多比丘尼早期的比丘尼当中呢，比较特别值得一提的是槟城菩提学院的创办人方莲尼师，他具有特殊的才华和智慧，凭着特殊的毅力，在1935年创办了菩提学院。目的在传扬佛法、收容孤儿和设立佛教教育。他亲任主持宣讲佛法， 同时也恭请道街、慈航2位法师前来弘扬佛法。1937年7月23日尼斯圆寂，时年36岁。后来，菩提学院创办了菩提小学、中学，是马来西亚佛教自办的少数学校之一。另外有一些比丘尼，他们就是在初一十五售卖素菜，以赚取生活费和寺庙的经费。他们对于佛法并没有特别深入的研究，也没有外出弘法，但是在个人修行方面呢，则以念佛为主要的修行法门。在教育方面来说，早期的比丘尼众并没有特别强调教育，一般上他们自小在寺庙长大，有的只受过小学教育或是中学教育，也有大部分没有受过教育，只是由领养的师父们教他们诵经。学会诵经对他们来说是十分重要的。由于教育贫乏，虽然他们会诵经，但是不明白尼众，从事于弘法工作的比丘尼众，从事于山上服务的比丘尼众，默默耕耘的禅修的比丘尼众，从事佛教教育的比丘尼众。在马来西亚从事佛教教育工作者的比丘尼众，大部分它是一间正规的佛教机构，甚至在马来西亚教育部注册生效的佛教学院，其学术地位获得政府的承认。凡是高中班毕业的学生，都可以入学院自耕自供的精神。目前的教务主任、社监和一些老师都是从本身学院毕业的比丘尼众。除了在马来西亚佛学院服务的比丘尼众之外呢，尚有许多佛学院毕业的学生尼众散布周日补习班、成立图书馆、业务中心等等，让学生在课余当中接受佛法的熏陶。像这一类的比丘尼，虽然没有正式受聘于正规的学校教书，但是他们同样的能够负起教育下一代的工作。另一类的佛教教育工作者的民众，是从事幼教工作的教师，他们在幼稚园中担任老师或者行政工作，把佛法种植在幼小的心灵中，引导幼小的心灵走向菩提大道。香林幼稚园便是其中一间由佛教寺庙创办的幼稚园，历任的董事长或是园长都由出家人担任。目前由比丘尼负责行政和教授佛学，是全国唯一设有佛学课的幼稚园。发展佛教社会福利工作的比丘尼，在马来西亚佛教界内从事佛教教育福利工作的比丘尼众相当的普遍。他们都能够发挥菩萨入世利他的精神，服务社会群众。在这些菩萨比丘尼当中，特别值得介绍的2位具有代表性的是吉隆坡修成林喜圣中心的主持比丘尼，和槟城净莲严正临终关怀中心的主持比丘尼。他们不具慧眼，能够观察到目前社会病苦大众之下，修成林创立了社会人士需要的洗肾中心。从最初4台洗肾机开始，扩充到目前位于古总的一所4层楼的综合医疗中心。他所领导的社会福利工作，具有修成林洗肾中心之言之启用观世音菩萨功德会，由10个信徒组织开始，继而成立修成林爱心慈善卡，让洗肾福利基金会有一个固定的收入，为洗肾病患者呢提供了长期永久的福利工作。除此之外，尚有上知识星级班，为公众提供这方面的教育知识。以实践时尚、医疗、教育及文化4大福利事业。儿童启蒙教育中心、修成林电脑图书馆、环保资源回收小组、 中风医疗中心、流动慈善检验中运动等等的社会福利活动。一直为大马10届青年奖之人道主义及志愿社会福利荣誉奖，表达了大马社会对法师的慈善事业的肯定。同年，修成林洗肾中心荣获 ISO 911-0012000年品质管理保证，也被列入大马纪录大全之大马首发挥大丈夫的魅力，成为菩萨的慈悲无畏的社会福利事业。他的成就是大马民众的光荣。另一位热心服务社会的觉莲比丘尼是在槟城，他与一般专业人士创办了目前社会最需要的福利社会工作，就是净莲慈悲院，一所末期严正的庇护所，是马来西亚第一间寻找生命的价值，记起病者最后的求生意志，消除负面的情绪，乐观地面对事实，进而重建生命。觉莲比丘尼凭着无比的毅力和慈悲心，让病患者庄严地度过余生，是大乘菩萨精神的全面体现，也是我们马来西亚比丘尼的光荣。传统性的寺院住持比丘尼，一般上传统性的寺庙住持的比丘尼，大部分也是自小被领养在寺庙，他们学习唱诵经文另外呢，还有一些致力于弘法工作的比丘尼，这些比丘尼他们认为弘法是他们最主要的工作，所以他们都能够极力的去弘法，而他们大部分是由马来西亚佛学院所毕业的学生。除此之外呢，有一些丧葬服务的比丘尼，他们也唱诵经文，为一些家属服务，当他们家里有人逝世的时候那么还有一些比丘尼呢，是属于那个禅修方面的。对不起。
1 minute。OK， 师傅请继续。师傅可以用我的麦。可以。
非常谢谢。就是知道介绍的是，除了以上所说呢，马来西亚最近有一班比丘尼，他们专门致力于推动禅修。禅修方面是以止观为重要修行的法门，他们是慧灯静修组的比丘尼。那么这些比丘尼除了静坐以外，也研究经典，但是比较有规律性和计划性的研究。他们除了本身修禅以外呢，还向马来西亚各地呢去带动禅修。他们都来自于属于不同州的帮助这些初学者的固定的禅修助教谢谢。
I have to thank the organizing committee for being so prompt. Just a reminder actually for the speakers, once in a while when you're reading the text, please look at the audience, because at the back of the audience there's someone actually trying to put 5 minutes, 3 minutes and 1 minute. So at least you can have the chance to, pace it. I think it's, thank you, Venerable, for a very comprehensive coverage on the perspective of the Buddhist nuns in Malaysia. What are the contribution? What are the major contribution work that they have carried out for the last for many years? And after having a general perspective of the Buddhist nuns in Malaysia, it will be good actually for us to probably explore the subject a little bit further by looking into the Buddhist women in Malaysia and Singapore. And we cover actually Singapore today because the speaker, she's actually from Singapore. And then on their freedom as well as the opportunity for spiritual cultivation. And this afternoon we are very fortunate to have Sister Sumitra with us. She's actually born in Singapore, and she's a Chinese Buddhist nun. In 1985, she have given out her professional career as an accountant and took to the life of the Anagarika. And Sister Sumitra received her ordination under the Theravada Buddhist order in Sri Lanka in 1992. And besides Sri Lanka, Sister Sumitra also has spent time in Forest Monastery in Thailand, as also acquainted with the Mahayana as well as the Vajrayana tradition. As you can see from here, I think in Malaysia, the distinction actually between the Buddhists, whether they are Mahayana, Theravada, are not so clear-cut. Since 1985, together with the teacher, Venerable Mahinda, Sister Sumitra has been conducting meditation, retreats, talks, workshops, as well as camps in Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Indonesia. And she has also assisted Venerable Mahinda with the annual novitiate program at the Buddhist Mahavihara in Brickfields for a period of more than 10 years. And currently, she is the spiritual advisor to the Australian Buddhist Mission and the vice president of the Dhammadutta Foundation in Australia. And she is also the assistant teacher at the Aloka Meditation Center in Australia, and work very closely with the youth groups as well as the ladies group of the Australian Buddhist Mission. So without much ado, shall we invite Sister Sumitra to give a presentation on Buddhist women in Malaysia and Singapore, their freedom and opportunity for spiritual cultivation.
Very Reverend sisters and brothers and sisters in the Dharma, you have to excuse me a bit because I just recovered from my flu from a long trip from Europe and China, and just came from Australia 2 days ago. Can you hear me? Well, before I start, I also like to say that Buddhism talks about relative time, space. So in case I run out of time, please forget about time, and as long as the majority likes to hear, let it go on. If they don't like to hear, cut me short in 5 minutes. So, and also I'd like to thank the organizers for all this hard work. And I like to be very small, very ordinary, but the chairman talks so much about me. So I'd like you to really put me just as an ordinary person like you to share with you and about spiritual cultivation. We are all very fortunate that we're living in a special era, especially for the woman. And the women now, today, enjoy higher levels of freedom, respect, and opportunity as compared to their foremothers. Women are empowered to seize the opportunities and realize their fullest potentials in many fields, such as education. We can see Dr. Esu today. She's such an impressive person, and there are many more other scholars and lay practitioners here, and in science, in technology, politics, and economics. I spent most of my time, in fact, the last 20 years, most of my time in Australia, and from time to time come back to Malaysia and Singapore, where I'm grateful to all the teachers here who have actually trained me and look after me, support me in this way of life. Without comparing with any other countries, which, there are so many of you here from many Buddhist countries, I'm going to share with you my experience and observation about the women in these countries that I spend most time with. The people, the women in these countries are blessed. Not only the conditions in these countries permit them to pursue the worldly goals, but also provide them with a precious opportunity to pursue the higher goal of spiritual liberation. Blessed with the relative political and economic stability, religious tolerance, multicultural and multilingual heritage in these countries, our countries is really a rich and fertile ground for the growth of the three traditions of Buddhism: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And within each of these traditions, there are various schools and various lineages. And you can see that there are more and more temples, more and more Dhamma centers, and more meditation centers setting up in these countries. All these different traditions are able to coexist side by side, living in peace and harmony, helping each other. And that's why you see me sitting here next to a Mahayana nun. And also because of the language, I will be able to understand her in Chinese. I don't need that microphone, translator thing. So this is something that we have in these countries. And also, In addition to that, we are blessed with the opportunity to meet and receive teachings from not only the local teachers and masters, but also from overseas. We are fortunate that we are able to have the financial stability to invite many masters from far away, from the West, from Tibet, from China, to come to teach the different methods of meditation and mental cultivation. And according to our affinities, we are able to reach to those teachings. And with the economic and political stability of these countries, we also have the opportunity to go for long retreats, whether as lay people, as nuns. There's always that opportunity. And also to go for long retreats overseas to search for dharmas. Example, going to India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Australia, and the Western countries. And I'm saying this also including myself when I was training as 7 years as Anandakarika. I have the opportunity. I was being blessed. I get support from my teacher, from the people, from the devotees. Spirituality goes beyond words, beyond race, beyond gender, tradition, and religion. And we can really see it in these countries that we have this opportunity. And also, you can see that it's so wonderful in this country that although we may belong to one tradition, but yet everyone is so open-mindedness. And in the past, long time ago, if you're in a Theravada tradition, if you go into a Vajrayana, you can see your friends around you will be talking about you, and you feel the pressure not going to learn from them. But today, you see more and more people have the open-mindedness to share more in depth, because there are certain things that in Theravada tradition, we don't emphasize very much. But in the Mahayana, in the Vajrayana, they emphasize certain things that we can learn. And in these countries, we have the opportunity and freedom to learn. No one stops you. I give you an example for myself. And when I was young, really young, from birth, I go to Chinese temple, to Kuan Yin. And I love seeing Kuan Yin, the compassion. And I always pray and ask for help and guidance. But as I grew up, I went into a Theravada Sri Lankan tradition. And then from there, went to Sri Lanka and then be ordained in that. And then my teacher has a Sri Lankan monk, but very open-minded. He allows me, after training with him, he allows me to travel to other parts, to Tibet, to Sikkim, and China, and also to the West, to learn and to broaden my heart, to broaden my views. And in these countries, we find that many people, they don't follow they follow one, but yet they can go. And you find that it builds up more understanding and more compassion in them. And if we can go beyond this tradition more and more, you'll find that we go beyond religion. Because you find that in these countries, we have various religions. We are not really a Buddhist country. And with that, we are able to live with other religious groups and have dialogues with them and have the tolerance and love for each other. So you find that the external freedom is there, the opportunity is there, but whether we seize it or not, it will depend on oneself. It depends on our own honesty, our sincerity to accept the true nature of things. We need to be mindful, we need to be truthful, we need to be honest to ourselves, to acknowledge the impermanence of things in this world, and the things that's changing so fast in this world. You can see with our own eyes that there's so much trouble and so much turbulence in the world today. Every day you can see and hear there's natural disasters here and there, floods, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, bird flu. And on top of that, with all the man-made trouble of terrorism, increasing violence, and then individually going down to the relationship problem, leading to a lot of depression and suicides. So when we women look at that and taking the understanding and realizing our innate nature, which is soft and gentle, we must use that we have that quality. If we see it that way, then our bodhicitta will grow, our compassion will grow to want to help the world. And with that motivation, then we will truly want to develop ourselves to help others. So what is this spiritual cultivation? It is that practice. I'm going beyond just religion. It is that practice that brings peace, that brings joy and love to oneself and to others. There's so much fear, anger, mistrust in the world. People can be very well educated, can be holding high position, but deep inside there, many are having fear, many are having no trust to each other, even between husband and wife. So we can see that there's really lacking of trust and love in this world today. And that's why the spiritual cultivation is very important, whether we are a Sangha member or lay person. So to think of something to remind us, to motivate us, and inspire us, is to think of the coming Buddha, Maitri Buddha. He is an embodiment of love, pure love. If we can connect with him, it will remind us, we will constantly think about love and motivate us, inspire us to develop this pure love. I'm talking about pure love. So that you don't misunderstand, because words are just words, and if we perceive it in a certain way, we attach to something when we think that's love. So put this in your mind, it's pure love. How to develop this pure love? We need to really truly have the faith and confidence in the Triple Gem. Faith and confidence in ourselves that we can purify ourselves, we can develop this pure love. And faith and confidence in the person who delivered the teachings to you, your teacher, the instructor. And one more thing, which is very important, we need to be honest to ourselves. We need to be sincere to ourselves. Otherwise, we can just cheat ourselves and say no this way and that way. We need to be able to accept the true nature of things. So if we go further into that, how? We really need to silence our mind. We need to really get our mind into the natural state, that is without projecting our mind to anything, without fixing our mind on any object, without creating anything, without thinking, but just this moment of pure awareness. In that pure awareness, you will start to discover the natural compassion in you. Whether Buddhists or non-Buddhists, whether nuns or lay people, that natural compassion is in every one of us that most people have forgotten or neglected. You'll be able to feel the soft and gentleness in you, in your heart. And when we have this natural compassion with awareness, we will be able to accept things, to understand things as they are, that all phenomena comes and goes, it's changing all the time. In that natural state, in that calm and quietness, when you see that, you will naturally accept things as they are. You go beyond good and bad. You go beyond like and dislike, love and hate. And this is truly the pure Dhamma that we need to develop. And that will open our heart. When our heart is open, the love will flow. You don't have to create. It will just flow. And with this, we will be able to solve the problems in our day-to-day life. We will be able to find the solutions and eventually to overcome our greed, hatred, and delusion. So Dr. Esu was saying that in North America, some are going for meditation and some, the immigrants, they are still on the chanting and prayers. And in this part of the world, we have also this. And I personally feel that we need all these things to a certain degree, according to your affinity. And in the natural state, if you're in natural state, it goes beyond form. If you chant, it's chant beyond form. If you pray beyond form. If you meditate with any method, it goes beyond form. So at the end of the day, it becomes one. That one mind, one heart is just there. So once we realize this truth, we will truly be free Earlier on, I talked about external freedom, external opportunity. But now when you start to practice this, you really have the freedom. And you will be able to spread this sublime Dharma with an unbounded heart. Unbounded. They're so free, so light, and joyful. And you will be able to give this not only to Buddhists. Remember, we live in the world. It's not just Buddhists. We have to go beyond Buddhists. We have to give this to all other sentient beings, whatever religion they believe. Then we really will develop this big heart. Love is universal. It brings light. It brings joy. And it comes through understanding. It comes through emptiness of I and mine, which cause so much suffering to everyone. And it brings love and compassion. So, dear sisters, practice well in whatever capacities you are in, whether you are in the Sangha members, lay practitioners, scholars, mothers, wives, daughters, sisters. Please practice well to promote this peace and harmony in this world. For us to develop and for us to want to develop into a certain status, it will come naturally when we show that we can do this. The world will recognize you. The world will want you to be in a better role. We don't have to fight for it. We don't have to struggle for it. The merits, the blessings will be there. And we can bring this message, this peace message, to the world through whatever skills you have, through teaching, through writing, through arts, through music, and through social activities. But remember, all these activities has to be carried out with pure love. Only pure love can penetrate and soften the hearts. When it softens your heart, you'll be able to soften others' heart. So I'd like to just make a little request that we spend a few moments of silence to radiate out this pure love to the world. Just settle your mind into the most relaxed and natural state.